Welcome to Biafran National Television and Radio, BNTVR, Voice of the Rising Sun, official broadcast station of the state of Biafra. Thank you for joining us on Rising Sun News. I'm your host, Pointer. Here are the headlines. Nigerian state-sponsored blackmail against indigenous Biafran youths. The selective justice against MAZI NNAMDI KANU. The draconian law in ORSU IHITEUKWA is null and void. Now the details. The memo from the Biafran Defense Headquarters, 2nd Division, Suka Province, State of Biafra, informed the global community and the entire public about the Nigerian state-sponsored blackmail, lies, and malicious reports ongoing against indigenous Biafran youth by the occupying Nigerian Terrorist Joint Task Force Southeast Operation Udoka. The code-named Operation Eastern Sanity has engaged in extrajudicial violence and killings of indigenous Biafran youth in the disguise of searching and neutralizing members of IPOB ESN in the occupied territories of the state of Biafra. The recent operations by the Terrorist Task Force Operation Udoka in OKWU Umudin in MAZI Enugu Province included the destruction of homes, farmlands, and properties for no just reason, and also the arbitrary arrest and disappearance of youth in the locality. The 4th Geneva Convention for Civilians strictly stipulates in Article 46 that, quote, family honor and rights, the lives of persons and private property, as well as religious convictions and practice must be respected, end of quote. That means the indigenes of the state of Biafra have the right to practice their culture and traditions and should not be wrongly accused of performing rituals to promote kidnappings and other vices. The Biafran Defense Headquarters, 2nd Division, Suka Province, State of Biafra, stated that the occupying government and Terrorist Joint Task Force, Operation Udoka, is promoting insecurity and killings by their unprofessional conduct, which violates indigenous, regional, and international humanitarian laws, compelling genocide, massacres, war crimes, and aggressions against indigenous Biafrans. Article 15 of 2 of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People guarantees the right of indigenous peoples to be consulted in matters to combat prejudice and eliminate discrimination by states. Even as the terrorists in northern Nigeria are pampered and regarded as prodigal sons by the occupying Nigerian terrorist Chief of Defense Staff General Olufemi Oluyede, while ignoring that terrorism offenses according to the Nigerian Constitution is a criminal act with penalties of long-term imprisonment to death sentence in the occurrence of death during the act. The memo praised the firm decision by indigenous Biafran youth to reject the recruitment exercise of the occupying Nigerian terrorist armed forces and urge them to remain committed to the respect for the sovereignty of the state of Biafra, stating Article 5 of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, proclaiming the right of indigenous people to political, legal, economic, social, and cultural institutions of their own, and with the choice to participate with that of the state, and also Article 6 of the same UNDRIP, which reaffirms that, quote, every indigenous individual has a right to a nationality, end of quote. And there is a recent report of arrest of youths in Maku, that is in Agu local government or Agu district of Enugu province. Those youths in Maku were accused of being members of the IPOB ESN and were just sent to Enugu prisons without any form of trial. That is extrajudicial, and they should be released unconditionally and immediately for the sake of the respect of their fundamental freedom and human rights. The chair of the Biafran National Legal Advocates (BNLA), Justice Okoro Antioch Ondo GC, described the life sentence imprisonment of IPOB leader MAZI KANU as a reflection of selective justice against indigenous Biafrans. Justice Okoro stated that MAZI KANU is a civil rights activist aiming to secure a referendum for Biafran sovereignty and independence from Nigeria. He stated that the trial of the IPOB leader by the occupying Nigerian government was shambolic and unjustified and characterized by inefficiency, lack of quality, and unaccountability of the justice system, which collaborates with the ignorance and inadmissibility of international law based on the inherent right to self-determination, admission of compromised evidence and mass prosecuting witnesses, several amendments of original charges, reckless disregard for court ruling in his favor, threat to defense attorney and his family members, and denial of medical attention. The chair of the BNLA, that is the Biafran National Legal Advocate, questioned the use of the Sharia law in a secular state such as Nigeria, calling for the prevention and combating of all forms of discrimination, intolerance, violence, and persecution against indigenes of the state of Biafra, on our exercise of the freedom to thought, conscience, and religion or belief, and also the inherent right to self-determination as guaranteed by the Charter of the United Nations, African Union Charter on Human and People's Rights, United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, etc. Justice Okoro of the Biafran National Legal Advocates (BNLA) demanded for the release and handover of MAZI KANU to the Biafran Provincial Government (BPG), Government of the State of Biafra, and also requested for the certified true copy of the judgment for charge number FHC/ABJ/CRU/383/2015 concerning the defendant Nnamdi KANU, as earlier requested through the correspondence from the Office of the Head of State (BPG) and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the State of Biafra with RF BA/0080/BPG and dated Orie, Wednesday, 26 November 2025. Colonel Obinna Jideofor, ORSU Provincial Administrator, has notified the indigenous peoples and the general public that the so-called group Heroes of Igbo Liberation has been categorized as terrorists sponsored by the occupying government of the Federal Republic of Nigeria to cause tension and anarchy in ORSU, IHITEUKWA, and environs. The group had warned the indigenes and public in ORSU, IHITEUKWA, that it is forbidden to be in possession of any material related to Biafra in the community, and also further stated that whomever is found with the Biafran flag, newsletter, and the picture of IPOB leader MAZI KANU would be beaten to death. Colonel Obinna stated the enjoyment of the right of peaceful assembly and freedom of association with others, which is constituted in the Biafran National Legal Bond, and also the right to a nationality as covenanted in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, UDHR. The Provincial Administrator of ORSU Province warned the so-called Heroes of Igbo Liberation Group not to engage in extrajudicial practices against indigenous peoples in ORSU, IHITEUKWA, and also declared as null and void the draconian laws advocated by the terrorist group. That brings to conclusion this edition of Rising Sun News on Biafran National Television and Radio BNTVR, Voice of the Rising Sun, official broadcast station of the state of Biafra. The headlines again. The Nigerian state-sponsored blackmail against indigenous Biafran youth. The selective justice against MAZI KANU. The draconian law in ORSU, IHITEUKWA is null and void. You should remember, 30th May 2026 is the Biafran Armed Forces Remembrance Day. It's a national holiday. Every government offices will be on a lockdown. Remember to follow us on all our social media handles. I'm your host, Pointer. Take care.
I am Africa. Agent. The drum that beats within your chest. I am the breath of the savannah, the thunder over the mountains. I am Africa, eternal, fierce, and divine.